Good evening and welcome to the 2024 Annual Gala of the Leo Baeck Institute. I am so happy about the noise level because it means we have so many people here. My name is Markus Krah. I'm the Executive Director of the Leo Baeck Institute. And I'm sure that you will have noticed, thank you. You will probably have noticed either upstairs or now finding your seats that we have a full house today. We are sold out. Everything are a little cozier than usual, but I think that's good. We are LBI. Let's be intimate, everybody. So I think the fact that we have such a great turnout has a lot to do with the wonderful speakers we have. So I want to give a quick welcome to our three main speakers tonight, Shulamit and Jehuda Reinharz, our honorees, and Tom Friedman, who will deliver the laudatio. All three will be introduced properly later in the program. I also take this great turnout as a sign of your support. And in conversations with colleagues of mine working for other Jewish institutions, I've been told that they all notice a marked increase in attendance at their events and programs over the past few months. And I dare speculate that this has to do with a new appreciation of community and being together in these difficult days. A year ago, we had our gala dinner 2 weeks after October 7th. This year, it is a week after the anniversary. I don't know, maybe you share my perception that for all the talk about what has happened since and what is still happening with no clear end in sight, for all the talking, we sometimes feel bereft of words and sometimes even relieved when we don't have to talk. So what I would like to do is invite you all to take a few moments and to fill these moments silently with all the anguish and anger and rage and sorrow that we've been through since October 7th, with the helplessness that we feel and with whatever hope we may also feel in the face of all this. Let's take a few moments for this. And as we acknowledge those sentiments, we should also acknowledge that there may be many differences, maybe even sharp differences among the perspectives and sentiments we all bring to this topic and to other topics. After all, the Middle East is not the only issue of concern these days. It is, of course, a well-worn piece of rhetoric to say that the Leo Baeck Institute has always understood itself as a big tent, which has room for a broad range of opinions. And I, for one, do believe that it is true, or that at least it should be true, that what brings us together tonight, a shared commitment to preserve the history of German-speaking Jews and to show its relevance for today, I believe that this commitment transcends those differences, or at least allows us to bracket them for tonight. I'm sad to report, but you will not be surprised to hear that I had reason to say many times over the past year that our mission has become ever more important in these difficult times as we face old, new threats and challenges to the legitimacy of Jewish existence and to the safety of Jewish lives. We at Leo Baeck do not give up the hope that a better understanding of the past can help people make better sense of the present and make better decisions for the future. And I hope your presence tonight expresses your support of this belief. This belief informs our work, collecting archival material, supporting scholarship, and offering our resources to give the past a voice in the present and in the future. And as you know, we do this in our upcoming programs on anti-Semitism, for example, in our award-winning podcast Exile, and in many other ways. And we've been doing this for almost 70 years now. The Leo Baeck Institute was founded in Jerusalem in 1955 by German Jewish refugee intellectuals. The most prominent among them were Martin Buber and Hannah Arendt. And these names alone and the mission they entrusted to all of us make for an enormous sense of responsibility we feel for what the LBI has achieved over the past 70 years and for what is ahead. You may have seen in the slideshow upstairs the logo which we have chosen for our anniversary year, 2025. Our programmatic slogan is LBI at 70, Bridging Generations. And you will see more of this going forward. I invite you to come back to LBI for the many programs we plan on the anniversary. There will be exhibitions, there will be lectures, there will be publications, and much more, all in the spirit of bridging generations. And I hope you will remain part of our community that bridges those generations. Looking around, I suspect that a few of you are old enough or know otherwise of the ad campaign which ran in the 1960s and 70s, I think, by Levi's, the bread maker, which said, "You don't have to be Jewish to love Levi's real Jewish rye." So I would use that and say you don't have to have German Jewish roots to support and be interested and attend our programs. It may help, I won't dispute that, but you don't have to have such biographical backgrounds. None of what LBI has done and will do would be possible without the work and the moral and financial support of many people. And we are fortunate to have this support from you all and from many others. Too many to be mentioned at this point. I want to, anyway, acknowledge a few. And let me begin with LBI staff. Those of you who are here, would you please rise, because nothing that we do, please stand up. No family collection would be processed, no panel discussion would take place, there would be no exhibition and no podcast, no newsletter without the staff. Thank you to all of you, and on this particular occasion I want to single out Sally Carroll and her team who organized this evening. In what we do today, we build on the work of previous leaders of LBI, so I want to thank the two previous executive directors who are with us today. My immediate predecessor, Billy Weitzer, and my pre-predecessor, Carol Kahn-Strauss. Where are you, Carol? There she is. Hi, Carol. And I also want to acknowledge that the daughter of the late executive director, Fred Grubel, Ms. Lucille Goldsmith, is also with us. Lucille, I don't know, there she is. I want to thank our board of trustees who provide the 4 W's that allow LBI to go forward. The 4 W's being work, wisdom, wealth, and worry. And I single out for all this our LBI president, David Marwell, who is right here, who, as he wrote in a recent email, tries to keep this unruly bunch of, oh, no, this was not what you meant for me to say, who gracefully leads this group of distinguished supporters of our institute. And I want to welcome our emeritus president, Rabbi Isma Schorsch, who's with us here. I want to thank our sponsors, whose names you have seen in the slideshow and whose names you have in the program book. And without your work and your support, we couldn't do what we do. So thank you so much for your support. It means a lot to us, not just financially, but also as an expression that you find our work worthy of your support. I also want to acknowledge the support LBI receives from the German government, which is represented tonight, among others, by the new Consul General in New York, Till Knorn. Welcome to New York and to LBI. And as you know, we are meeting today in the Center for Jewish History, which is not just a building in which we are, but it is also an institution devoted to working with LBI and the other partner institutions to preserve Jewish history and show its relevance. It is led by Chairman of the Board Peter Baldwin, right here. CEO Rio Daniel. You guys have to identify yourself if you want to reap that applause. So there's Rio and President Garth Rosenfeld. Thank you. And I'm also glad that our 4 partner institutions within the center are represented tonight. That is the American Jewish Historical Society, the American Sephardi Federation, Yeshiva University Museum, and YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. Welcome and thank you for being such good collaborators. A good number of our academic advisors are here. You know who you are. There are too many of you, but we value your critical, constructive help in our programming, and we hope that you will continue being critical companions on our way. Last but not least, I want to thank the staff of the center, which makes tonight's evening possible, and Beryl Fischler, who may be busy in the kitchen, who with his company Magic Fish is responsible for the food tonight. So thanks to Beryl and his team of servants and everybody else who will feed us with delicious food tonight for all the work that you're doing for us. And now I invite Joan Lessing, Vice President of the LBI and herself a bridge between generations, to recite the traditional blessing over bread, hamotzi, before the meal and the program, which I hope we will all enjoy. Thank you all for coming, and I hope we'll have a great evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now that was very good. That was terrific. Since I stand between you and dinner, I know you're all very hungry, and I stand between you and our speakers. Allow me to begin. My name is David Marwell, and I'm very proud to serve as the board president of the Leo Baeck Institute. Next year, as Markus said, LBI will mark its 70th anniversary. And this dinner each year offers a wonderful opportunity to reflect on our achievements and our progress toward fulfilling the ambitious goals set by our founders a lifetime ago. Then, a decade after the Holocaust and the liberation of Europe, it was hoped that the precious and precarious legacy of German-speaking Jews could be secured through collection and preservation, through scholarship and education, through imagination and determination. LBI has made such giant strides in implementing that early vision and heartfelt objective. Any quick review of our achievements and success makes that stunningly clear. I could speak of our nearly completely digitized archive comprising contributions from thousands of individuals, families, and organizations. I could speak of our prodigious research library and art collection. I could speak of our record of facilitating and promoting scholarship worldwide and of educating a broad public through smart and innovative programs. By any standard, we are worthy, I believe, of the hopes and the dreams that our founders placed on those who would follow them. And tonight, I can say unequivocally that none of these accomplishments could have been possible without the generosity of our supporters, of all of you. And I thank you for joining us tonight and for joining with us in our important mission. You know, we couldn't fit another table or another person at the tables that are here tonight. This has been a stunning success for us. We've raised more than our, what I think now was a too modest goal. And that is not to say that you shouldn't be encouraged to fork over a little bit more before the end of the evening. At the beginning of the evening tonight, Markus called for a moment of reflection, inviting each of us in this place and on this occasion, in our own way, to acknowledge and commemorate this past year and the dramatic and tragic events that have shaken our world and challenged the sense of stability and safety for ourselves and for those we hold dear. In the context of what appear to me to be often banal virtue signaling, and acknowledging that there is no adequate way for an institution such as ours to capture the range of emotions, opinions, and worldviews that occupy our stakeholders and animate those who make up our extended family, I applaud Markus for finding, especially in this season of reflection, a most meaningful way to memorialize October 7 and its aftermath. In the end, it is our conduct as individuals and as an institution that defines who we are. I should add that during my reflection before, my many thoughts included those close to LBI who left us during this past year. I mention here our former trustee, Guy Stern, the intrepid Ritchie boy and teacher who died last December at the age of 101. I thought as well of a giant in Jewish education and communal life, Rabbi David Ellenson, who passed away also last December. And I thought of Dr. Ruth Westheimer, a former Leo Baeck medalist who left us in July at the age of 96. Ruth was a champion of LBI, promoting our interest wherever she could, whenever she could, with her particular flair and sometimes outrageous vocabulary. More than once, she guaranteed a long life of good sex for anyone who would contribute to LBI. She was also a beloved fixture at this very dinner for each of the 25 years that I have attended it, and many more before that, I'm sure, except for last year, when she began her final decline, and I myself will miss her especially tonight. Markus has already acknowledged a lot of people here, but I think good things and important debts bear repeating, so I will repeat some of them. I want to acknowledge the presence here this evening of so many of the members of our Board of Trustees. You know, we have a board of about 28 people, and many of them some live in Europe, and some live on the West Coast, and some live in the Midwest. But a vast majority of those who live in the New York area are here tonight. So Markus didn't ask you to stand, but I think you should all at least raise your hand so that people will know who the Board of Trustees is. I salute them and thank them for their generosity, especially their patience with me, their leadership, and their good counsel. I also want to recognize, as Markus did, my distinguished predecessor, President Emeritus, Rabbi Dr. Ismar Schorsch. And I wanted to say hello to Till Knorn, whom I haven't yet met, but I look forward to working with him. You know, the consuls general of Germany have always been extraordinarily good friends and partners to LBI, and I have no doubt that you who have just arrived will join the ranks of really wonderful men and women who've preceded you, and I know we can count on you to be a good part of our family. Finding my place. I also want to acknowledge Sarah Bloomfield. Sarah is the longtime director of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and also my former boss, so hi, Sarah. And I will repeat the salute to Carol Constrauss and Billy Weitzer. And lastly, I want to thank the staff, as Markus did, but I think it bears repeating. No organization can exist without a good staff, and no good organization can exist without a brilliant staff, and we have one. This staff, day in and day out, display uncommon devotion, exercise, exemplary talent, and exhibit such deep commitment in their service to this institution and all that it represents. And they are led, as you have seen, by their extraordinarily gifted executive director, Markus Krah, who now in his third year, it's hard to believe, at LBI, has earned the admiration and respect not only of those he leads, but also of our partners, supporters, and the public we serve both here and abroad. And finally, it is my great pleasure to introduce Thomas L. Friedman, the three-time Pulitzer-prize winning journalist, renowned author, and distinguished columnist for the New York Times. His insightful analyses and thought-provoking commentaries have profoundly shaped our understanding of global affairs, economics, and environmental issues. As a prolific writer, Tom Friedman has authored numerous best-selling books, including From Beirut to Jerusalem, The World is Flat, Thank You for Being Late, all of which has enlightened readers around the world. His regular contributions to the opinion section of the New York Times never fail to engage and to stimulate. His ability to distill complex issues into engaging and thought-provoking narratives has earned him a reputation as one of the most influential voices of our time. Tonight, Tom Friedman will focus his attention on our honorees, Shulamit and Jehuda Reinharz. As individuals and together, they embody a remarkable synergy of scholarship, leadership, and community service. Their joint legacy continues to inspire and uplift countless individuals within the academic and Jewish communities. Please join me in welcoming Tom Friedman, who will deliver the laudatio.
David, thank you very much. It's a treat and an honor to be here at the Leo Baeck Institute. I've learned all about your amazing programs. I'm a little busy these days, but never too busy to come up and honor my two friends, Jehuda and Shula Reinharz, whom I've known forever. As we all know, this has been a hard year for Jews everywhere. So tonight, I want to talk actually about the best part of being Jewish that we should never forget to appreciate. It is to belong to a faith community spread out across the globe, so no matter where you go, there is someone there to connect with, share a meal with, play Jewish geography with, and make you feel not so much of a stranger in whatever that strange land is. The chief of the U.S. Navy once took me on a submarine beneath the Arctic on the Navy's annual ice exercise. 36 hours in a submarine. It was the week before Passover, and the Jewish sailors on the ship heard I was there and tried to persuade me to stay through Passover. They tried to tempt me by telling me, this is a true story, that they had stored a brisket in the submarine's freezer, and the captain was coming for Seder. Would I stay? I passed. Yes, to be a Jew is to be a tiny, thin thread, always available to be woven into a community with other threads coming from so many other places, places where you never even imagine being bound together, including beneath the North Pole. It was not so strange for me, though, because I am a Jew from Minnesota. We called ourselves the Frozen Chosen. And I want to tell you briefly tonight about how my thread intersected with Jehuda's thread and intersected with Shula's thread and wove together a beautiful friendship and for them a beautiful marriage and lifelong collaboration to advance Jewish and women's causes and to speak a lot of German along the way. It's quite a magic carpet. My thread is the least important, so I won't waste much time on it. For the first 15 years of my life, I was obsessed with golf. And no, it was not the Persian Gulf. It was golf. But in my sophomore year of high school, 1968, I had that teacher. Her name was Hattie Steinberg, room 313 at St. Louis Park High School. She was my journalism teacher, and her journalism course is the only journalism course I have ever taken. Not because I was that good, but because she was that good. I sit up straight to this day, still thinking about Hattie, anytime I go on assignment without a tie. She was 62 when I had her, and now that I'm 71, that didn't seem old, but when you're 15, it seemed old. But she taught me to read the New York Times every day. That's how a proper journalist starts their day. And she was the opposite of cool, but we hung around her classroom like it was the malt shop, and she was Wolfman Jack. My sophomore year of high school was the other thing that happened that year. And my parents took me on a trip to Israel to visit my older sister, who was on her junior year abroad at Tel Aviv University. So 1968 was a big year for me. I had never been on an airplane before that, and I had only left Minnesota to attend Jewish summer camp, Camp Herzl in Webster, Wisconsin, where, incidentally, one of my counselors was Abe Foxman, later the head of the ADL, who had been born in pre-war Poland and survived the Holocaust thanks to being baptized and hidden away by their family's Catholic nanny. Abe came to America when he was 10 and one summer got a job as a camp counselor in Wisconsin, where we got woven together and remain friends to this day. My 1968 trip to Israel coincided with my newfound passion for journalism and instilled in me a burning desire in high school to be a foreign correspondent in the Middle East. I actually got my professional start in journalism, because after I graduated from Brandeis, I got a Marshall Scholarship, thanks to Brandeis, to go for 3 years of school in England anywhere I wanted. And my first year was at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. And there I met my then girlfriend, now wife, who was from Des Moines, Iowa. I had to go to London to meet a girl from Des Moines. We were walking down the street one day. Jimmy Carter was running against Gerald Ford for president, and there was a sign on the Evening Standard, the afternoon newspaper. You know, they always have these blaring headlines, you know, Brad to Jen, we're finished, you know. This sign said, Carter to Jews, if elected, I promise to fire Dr. K. And I stopped my then girlfriend, now wife, and said, Ann, look at that. Jimmy Carter's running for president, and he's trying to win Jewish votes by promising to fire the first ever Jewish Secretary of State. That's really odd. And I have no idea what possessed me, but I went back to my dorm room and I wrote a column about it. And my then girlfriend, now wife, took it home on spring break and walked it across the street to her neighbor, David, the editorial page editor of the Des Moines Register. And he liked it, and they printed it on a half page of the Des Moines Register with an Outh cartoon, and they paid me $50. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the whole world. I had an idea. I was walking down the street. I wrote it up. Someone paid me $50. and I was hooked ever after. I had actually started my school, though, at the University of Minnesota. I did a sophomore year abroad at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, but I needed a deeper dive into the Middle East as an undergrad, and one of my sister's high school friends had gone to Brandeis, which had this amazing reputation then for the humanities. So I transferred there in my junior year to study with some great Middle East scholars like Ben Halpern. I then went on to get a graduate degree, as I said, in Arabic and Middle East Studies from Oxford, and then launched my career as a foreign correspondent in the Middle East for UPI, first in Beirut and then for the New York Times, from Beirut to Jerusalem. I won 2 Pulitzer Prizes that decade, which brought pride to my alma mater, Brandeis, which on October 9th, 1988, awarded me an honorary doctorate. At the ceremony at a Boston hotel, every honoree had a member of the faculty as an escort. Mine was a professor of modern Jewish history named Jehuda Reinharz. And so our threads began to weave together. The Minnesota Jew standing in the procession with the Israeli-born German-speaking professor with his own remarkable journey to get to that intersection. Jehuda was born in Israel in 1944. His parents wanted to settle in America, but America was not letting many Israelis in then. So they moved to Essen, Germany, when Jehuda was 13. There he did his first 3 years of high school. He learned a lot more there, though, than just perfecting his German. It was in that cauldron that he perfected his passion for Jewish history as well. At the time, people did not talk about the Holocaust in Germany much, Jehuda told me in preparation for tonight. My parents did not talk about it in front of the kids, and in school we didn't learn about it. One day, though, my German history teacher declared in class that, what we did to the Jews was not that bad. It was only 3 million killed, not 6 million. I don't know what possessed me, Jehuda recalled, but I just said to him, "You're lying. You're lying." Now, you can say you're lying to an Israeli teacher in Israel, but you cannot say that to a German teacher in Germany. There was silence in the classroom. The teacher just looked at me, Jehuda said, trying to figure out what would be the proper punishment for such insolence. He could not just throw me out of school, so he said, "I'm going to give you a month to prove that I'm wrong. And if at the end of the month you can prove it, you will remain in this grade. You can't prove it. You will remain in this grade another year." This was 1959. Said Jehuda, "I don't know where I got this chutzpah." But he found a scholar in Frankfurt who sent him all kinds of materials on the Holocaust. When it came time to report back, Jehuda insisted on making his presentation not just to his class, but to the whole school in the auditorium. "Whatever I told them was more than they knew," he said, and after an initial silence, they all clapped. The teacher had no choice but to move me on to the next grade. Years later, when he met Shula and recalled for her that huge event in his life, that school auditorium in Essen kept getting bigger and bigger until it was almost as big as Madison Square Garden. One day, the German ambassador called Jehuda when he was President Brandeis and invited him to give some lectures in Germany. He said he would on the condition that his wife Shula could join him and they could go back to Essen and he could show Shula that school and that auditorium. The school was informed ahead of time. They were received by the principal who escorted them to that famous auditorium where Yehuda's passion for defending the Jewish people was born. Shula told me she couldn't help but burst out laughing. She expected Madison Square Garden, but was shown something more like the visiting team's locker room at Madison Square Garden. No matter. As I said, it was still big enough to launch a young man to become indisputably the best President Brandeis ever had, the best co-author of the best biography of the best president Israel ever had, Chaim Weizmann. And that is all that mattered. Along the way, Jehuda wrote roughly 30 other books on everything from the role of donkeys in the history of Palestine to the journey of pilgrims baptized in the Jordan River. Today, Jehuda holds maybe the most important job of all that he's had, President and CEO of the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Foundation, where he has the ability, resources, and responsibility to fund the best projects and build the best leaders doing the best tikkun olam, repairing the world in Israel and the United States, and strengthening Jewish life and democratic life in both countries. But how did Shula's thread get interwoven into Jehuda's thread? From the first time I met Shula at Brandeis, it was always clear to me that Jehuda was really Mr. Shula Reinharz, just as I am in Washington, Mr. Ann Friedman. Just as in Washington, Shula had amassed an academic career every bit as impressive as Jehuda's, and as much of an academic entrepreneur as he is when it comes to starting stuff. Shula was already a full professor of sociology and chair in the sociology department before Jehuda became president of Brandeis. She pioneered the field of Jewish women's studies at Brandeis, has written 15 books, and created 3 institutions to promote women's studies in general and Jewish women's studies in particular. That is, she established a feminist art gallery at Brandeis. She founded the Women's Studies Research Center at Brandeis that invites scholars from around the world to be resident researchers, not just in and out visitors, to collaborate with each other and produce their own works on gender issues. When Shula retired as its head, she left behind 80 women researchers doing work from all over the world. And in her spare time, Shula persuaded Hadassah to establish the Hadassah Brandeis Institute to do research on the intersection between Jews and gender. One of the hallmarks of Shula's books is a quest to find women in Jewish history who were little known but had huge impacts and to bring their stories to light. So, for instance, she wrote a book about Marcia Friedman, a prominent American-Israeli feminist who, along with Shulamit Aloni, burst the bubble of Israel's macho culture in the 1980s. She wrote a book about Manya Shochat, who in 1907 pioneered the idea of a collective farm and founded the first kibbutz prototype called Sejara before Dagania Aleph and Dagania Bet. It was a small experiment involving 8 men and 8 women, Shula told me. The men were supposed to be the guards while the women would tend to mostly the agriculture. But Shula explained that they all ended up doing both, and all 8 married each other. The book is called Against the Stream and sounds to me like a great movie script. Shula's thread traces back to Holland, where she was born and where her German-speaking father and mother separately hid for 3 years during the Nazi occupation. Her mother even dyed her hair blonde to look more German to get through the war. Shula's most recent book is called Hiding in Holland and is based on memoirs and letters in a journal kept by her father. When Shula was 7 months old, they moved to the U.S. and ended up living in New Jersey. Her parents spoke German at home, but told Shula it was English. Shula went to Barnard for her undergrad and got her PhD at Brandeis, but before that, she was in high school in New Jersey. It was there that she and Jehuda were braided together, because when Jehuda's family emigrated to America, they had little money, so they stayed with friends from Germany in New Jersey. Jehuda ended up going to high school in a town called River Edge. He basically knew no English. His parents spoke German at home in Haifa and told him it was Hebrew. Anyway, another student at that New Jersey high school was Shula. Her friends knew that she had spent a summer living on a moshav in Israel and thought she should meet this new student who had come from Israel via Germany. So she introduced herself to this Israeli-born Reinharz kid by telling him in her English accented Hebrew, "My name is Shula, and I'm going to help you adjust to this school." And so 2 threads from New Jersey via Holland and Israel via Germany met. Now, when it comes to gender equality, Shula was way ahead of her time. She asked Jehuda to marry her in his last year at JTS in 1967. He said yes. I told you he was smart. But it gets better. Years later, Jehuda told me that he once asked Shula, why did you ask me to marry you? And she was characteristically blunt. She said, I loved the movie Exodus and wanted to marry Paul Newman. But he was taken, and you were the next best thing. A few years later, Jehuda, as president of Brandeis, was introduced to Paul Newman and told him, my wife married me because she couldn't marry you. Our anniversary is coming up. We're going to rent a theater and show the movie Exodus. Could you come? Unfortunately, their schedules could not mesh, but Newman did send Shula a signed picture, and as Jehuda reminded me, my picture is not on her desk. Paul Newman is on her desk. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives this Jew from Minnesota great pleasure to bring all of our threads together and introduce these two remarkable Jewish educators, Shula Reinharz of Holland and New Jersey, and her trophy husband and Paul Newman look-alike, Jehuda Reinharz of Israel, Germany, and New Jersey. Shula and Jehuda are being honored with the Leo Baeck Medal, the highest honor the Leo Baeck Institute can bestow on people who have supported its mission of preserving and promoting the history and culture of German-speaking Jews who said being Jewish can't be fun. Thank you very much.
Jehuda and Shula, can I invite you to come up to the podium? Tom, why don't you come for the photograph too?
Well, after that Paul Newman story, which is true, you couldn't make it up, right? I just want to tell you how honored I am. I'm honored for getting this medal. It means so much to me. Thank you so much to everyone connected with the LBI. I'm honored that all of you came, and I'm honored that the 10 people I invited, or we invited, I should say, are here too, which is my family and some of my good friends. So thank you for doing this for us and for letting me see again people I knew when I was at Brandeis, and not in my high school, but you know, in other places. So, and I want to thank you, Tom, for letting people know about my work, my quirks, and my chutzpah. And you remember you said that Jehuda had chutzpah. Well, it pales in comparison, I think. But I don't mind. I think we make a good team. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my life. Tom has told some of the funniest stories, but I'll try to come up with something. First of all, I'd like to tell you that German Jewish history, language, jokes, and culture were really big themes in my life. Although I was born in Amsterdam and lived most of my life in the US with big periods in Israel too, my parents, my sister is here and my brother is here, so our parents were named Max Rothschild, Jewish name, and Ilse Rothschild, a German Jewish name. Her name actually was Strauss before they married. They were born in Germany, as were their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, going back many generations. My father grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home. I asked him if he called it Orthodox, and he said no, we called it traditional. It was traditional in the small towns of Bavaria where he was. His whole life was centered around the synagogue. So he grew up in this, what I'm calling Orthodox Jewish home in the small Bavarian town called Gunzenhausen, and that means the house of geese. I have been there many times. I haven't found that house. My mother, on the other hand, was born in an industrial German city, as compared to the rural area. It was called Ludwigshafen, and she said it reminded her of Newark. No, I hope no one's here from Newark. Okay. Or Ludwigshafen, actually. Okay, so she was born in Ludwigshafen to a family, in contrast with my father, who practiced hardly any Jewish customs at all. And yet, as teenagers, these two different and yet similar people, young people, converged. Like Tom used the metaphor of the thread, they converged in Munich because of something that's very clear to anybody here who knows German Jewish history. My grandfather said to my father, I want you to go to Munich because Gunzenhausen, this little Dorf, this little, horrible place, was, no one's here from Gunzenhausen. Okay, so he says, if you go to Munich, that is a cosmopolitan place with a university, and you can get away from all of this anti-Semitism. You might bump into Adolf Hitler, of course, but that's another story. And my mother was in Ludwigshafen, and she faced so much anti-Semitism in her school, which is her high school, that at 10th grade she dropped out. And I think that began a whole series of things that maybe happened more to women than it did to men. Where was she going to go from there? So she learned to be a housewife, a Hausfrau in Munich. But then something miraculous happened, and that is that both of them discovered German Jewish Zionist Habonim. It was very strange for my father because he was not in the Zionist mode so much as he was in traditional Judaism. And it was very strange for my mother because she had hardly any Jewishness at all. And the idea, and I'd love to do research on this, of Habonim taking all these different kinds of young Jews together was so important in the years leading up to the Holocaust or the World War II. Because, as my father wrote, Zionism at that time provided us with an alternate reality. The reality around them was that you Jews are terrible, our Unglück, our misfortune, and in Habonim, what happened? You are the future. You are the golden youth of the Jewish people, and you will lead us into the future. They both thrived in this alternative reality. But like every place else in Germany, Kristallnacht came to the Hachshara camp where they were learning agriculture so that they could build kibbutzim in Palestine. So when Kristallnacht came, the girls, here's another gender division, the girls were sent home to their families, and the boys were sent to Buchenwald. So in this case, women suffered less. Of course, they also suffered the separation. And when they were in Buchenwald, the German Jewish Zionist organization, Habonim, contacted its counterpart in Holland, and that in a place called Deventer, and that those people allowed some Jewish young people to come in on this condition, that they leave within 2 years. So if you ever hear about the way in which refugees came to Holland, you should understand that it was a temporary reprieve, not to welcome them into citizenship, which was really the same in many places. So they went to Holland, my mother and my father. They were not my mother and my father yet. And they learned agricultural skills, and then the situation got so bad that they went into hiding. And they survived for the last 3 years hiding. My father never saw the light of day except when he changed hiding places because one of them became dangerous. I'll just tell you the first 3 ones that he went to. Number 1, he was hidden in a haystack by a criminal. This person was who stole things, he put it in the haystack, and he said my father could stay there during the day and watch that property. So my father's first thing was sort of the criminalization of Habonim members. And the second one was a brothel. Brothel had rooms, you might not know that. They had rooms where people could go for a while, and my father was hidden in that. And then my father was hidden on farms. And one of the things, we talk about language a lot here. One of the things that was really great for my father was that he was told he had to work at a particular farm. And there were no Jews there, and there were no Germans there. So what did he do? He learned Dutch. And learning Dutch and knowing the culture, it basically saved his life. I don't know if you know that Holland was the last country to be liberated in World War II. So they were there longer than most people. And also that Holland has the reputation, or the data show, that it was one of the worst places to be during the war. There was approximately 85% of the Jews were murdered. Now, you know about Poland, maybe 90%. We always think of those countries as the killing fields, etc. But Holland was just about the same, but for different reasons. It's because they were fabulous bureaucrats, and they had data about everybody, and they sent them off on trains from Westerbork to Auschwitz. In the interim, my grandparents, my father's parents, had fled to the United States and had become part of a large circle of German Jewish refugees in the Boston suburbs. These people, while my parents were still in Holland and they were not in touch with each other, they didn't know if anybody was alive. But these people became my and my siblings, Tova and Jonathan, extended family, my grandparents' friends. We didn't have other relatives. All of these adults spoke German. Our seders were mostly in German, which is hard to do, partly in English and partly in Hebrew. The food in my house was German Jewish cuisine. My father talked about the Holocaust all the time and loved telling jokes, many of them in German. I know more punchlines in German than you could believe. And when he became the rabbi of a German Jewish congregation on the Upper West Side, he gave his sermons in German. And it is no wonder that when Jehuda and I visited Germany as a married couple the first time when we were tourists, I couldn't shake the sensation that everybody was Jewish because they all spoke German. Although German language and German Jewish culture were part of my personal identity, I did not think of it as part of my academic life. Several decades earlier, when I realized I wanted to know more about my family's history, I began to interview my parents informally, but regularly. I also collected documents that they had preserved. The big mystery is, how did they preserve them? I do not know. My father doesn't know how he preserved. They had preserved these, and these were strewn haphazardly throughout the house and forgotten about. An archivist's nightmare, With my parents' permission, I decided to write a fully documented book about my father's life from his childhood in Gunzenhausen through his years as a German Jewish refugee in Holland until he was liberated and came to the US. In that process, my father had become one of the very few Jews who survived the war in Holland out of the 140,000 Jews who had lived there at its start. It has not recovered its population. The Netherlands has the worst record of murdering its Jewish citizens and refugees of all Western countries, and one of my motivations was to tell that story. In the presentation of my book, in the preparation of the book, I visited Gunzenhausen several times and befriended the 9th grade teacher who had introduced the study of the Holocaust to students of that town. There were no Jews. Our friendship led us to create, with others, a Zoom-based dialogue group comprised of descendants of the Jews who had lived in Gunzenhausen, like me, as well as current citizens of the town. Gunzenhausen has no Jews, but it now has a very vibrant Jewish revival culture that the Germans of that town have taken on. Another outcome of my relationship with the school teacher was convincing the mayor to have Stars of David etched next to the names of Jewish soldiers from Gunzenhausen who had died in World War I. This was very important to me because Hitler always claimed that the Jews did not fight. A year and a half ago, the mayor invited all the Jewish descendants of Gunzenhausen to return for 3 days of remembrance. There were around 20 people from my family, along with descendants of Dad's friends and many others. On that occasion, we planted trees in the center of town, one for each Jewish family who had lived there. I was so pleased that so many members of my family came and that we created this Eitz Chaim, a tree of life. My research into my father's life resulted in the book Hiding in Holland, a resistance memoir in which I propose a new theory of resistance. It was published by Amsterdam Publishers, and it's available on Amazon. Now that I have told my father's story, I have begun to study my mother's experience. Although their lives overlapped in many ways, the stories are quite different. I only wish my mother were here so we could talk about that. I also wish my parents were here tonight to enjoy this beautiful evening and for hearing me tell my family's story. Thank you very much. And now, for the pièce de résistance, my husband, Jehuda Reinharz. What? Yeah, I'm going to be the MC now.
I'm really going to be quick. First of all, thank you, Tom, for your insightful remarks, for your friendship of so many years. You and Anne have been good friends of ours for forever, as you say, and I appreciate you coming again. I would also like to thank the Executive Committee, Board of the LBI, in honoring us with this very prestigious award. The only thing that I can't really believe is that I agreed to speak after Tom Friedman and Shula Reinharz. I must have been out of my mind. I'll be quick, really, I'll be quick. My relationship to German Jewry began at my birth. I was born in Haifa, in what seemed like little Germany at the time. Just like Shula, whose parents spoke German to her and said it was English, my parents spoke German to me and said it was Hebrew. Everybody in my extended family spoke German with a little bit of Hebrew mixed in. My grandmother, for example, who lived in Palestine and later in Israel for decades, knew only a few words in Hebrew and insisted on speaking German to everyone. Bus drivers, storekeepers, waiters, etc., embarrassing me to no end. When I reminded her that the people she was talking to did not understand a word of German, she would say that whoever did not speak German was not worth speaking to. Now, you know that Theodor Herzl himself believed that German would be the national language of the Jewish state. So my grandmother, unbeknownst to me at the time, was actually in line with the visionary of political Zionism. My immediate family moved to Essen, Germany in 1958, as Tom has already said, for economic reasons. There I spent most of my high school years studying everything except English. So when I came to the United States in 1961 to finish high school, I did not speak English at all. Fast forward to my college and graduate school years, my English vocabulary had expanded somewhat, but Shula still claims that I speak English with a German syntax. One might say that two things were preordained by my background. One, that I would marry Shula in order to continue to learn English. And second, that I would write a doctoral dissertation on a German Jewish topic. Now, I began my graduate career at Harvard studying medieval Jewish philosophy and historiography. And after I got my MA, I realized this is not where I belong. I really needed to work in the German area of some area of German Jewish history. And so I moved to Brandeis University, where I had the good fortune of studying with giants. I don't know if the names mean anything to you, like Alexander Altmann, Nachum Glatzer, Ben Halper, and Walter Laqueur, people of that sort. And the rest is, as they say, history. The precise title of my thesis at Brandeis was Deutschtum and Judentum, Jewish Liberalism and Zionism in Germany Before World War I. Punkt. Shula gave the eventual book to an English title, and it is called Fatherland or Promised Land, The Dilemma of the German Jew. What did you say? For several years, I shouldn't give her a chance. For several years after graduate school, I published articles that later appeared in the Leo Baeck yearbook. And I developed close ties with Leo Baeck Institutes in New York, London, and Jerusalem. In London, I had friendly relations with Robert Welch and Arnold Pauker, and in New York with Rabbi Max Grunewald, Isma Schorsch, and Fred Grubel. In Jerusalem, I was welcomed with open arms by the Jerusalem LBI leadership during one of my many sabbaticals in Israel. Clearly, these scholars were happy to see a budding researcher interested in the history of German Zionism and other related topics. Moreover, they were delighted that I was doing research on aspects of German Jewry in which they themselves personally played a significant role. They expressed their enthusiasm by graciously inviting me, giving me an office, providing access to their personal archives, and most important, paved the way for me to meet such giants as Robert Welch, Gershom Scholem, Siegfried Moses, Ernst Simon, and many others. These wonderful conditions enabled me to prepare a book of what I believed was the most significant documents on German Zionism. When I finished preparing the manuscript, they notified me that there would be a high-level meeting of the board, which included the personalities I just mentioned, to discuss my selections. I was invited to attend. Needless to say, I had some sleepless nights beforehand, but I went to the meeting really not knowing what to expect. I wish someone had recorded the heated arguments that ensued during the meeting, particularly between Robert Welch and Gershom Scholem. And these are major giants, as you know, about the comparative space dedicated in my book to each of their points of view. They had published their articles previously in the 20s and 30s in a periodical called the Jüdische Rundschau, and they would just not give in. The argument reflected a long simmering debate between them, a debate of which I was aware, but did not realize it had not been put to rest. Thankfully, I was not asked to resolve the debate on the spot, but each of them made sure to speak to me individually, and neither gave an inch. At the end of my sabbatical year, the Leo Baeck Institute in Jerusalem invited me to give a public talk on major trends in German Zionism. I was very careful to avoid anything that had to do with the debate, the controversy, and the two of them, of course, were sitting there waiting for me to make that mistake. I will always be grateful to have had the opportunity to meet amazing personalities in all three LBI institutes, and for this medal that you are bestowing on Shula and myself. The next time you invite me, I will give you my version of the relationship with Shula. Thank you.
Thank you very much to these three wonderful speakers. There would be much to say in terms of gratitude for your presence, for your words, for honoring us by accepting our honor. But I think it's safe to assume that we all would also like to enjoy the meal. Thank you very much for coming, to you and to everybody. Enjoy the evening, and please remain part of the family of the Leo Baeck Institute. Thank you.